Chapter 2, Malware and Social Engineering. Malware is a term that means software that enters a computer system without the user's knowledge or consent and then performs an unwanted and usually harmful action. So let's talk about first malware that spreads. This is led off by viruses. A computer virus is malicious computer code that, like its biological counterpart, reproduces itself on the same computer. The important part is on the same computer. There are various types. An appender infection basically appends itself first to the end of a file, and then as the file executes, it moves the first 3 bytes of the original file to the virus code and replaces them with a jump instruction pointing to the virus code. And when the program is launched, the jump instruction redirects the control to the virus. There's a Swiss cheese infection. Some viruses basically inject themselves into the program's executable code instead of the end of the file. Any overwritten original code is transferred and stored inside the virus code for proper execution after the infection. Then there is a split infection. In this technique, the virus is split into several parts. The parts are placed at random positions throughout the host program, overriding the original contents of the host. Now, a virus can only replicate itself on the host computer on which it's located. It cannot automatically spread to another computer. Instead, it typically relies on the actions of users to spread to other computers. There are several types of viruses. A program virus usually is an executable file. A macro virus is usually a script written as a macro. A resident virus is usually loaded into random access memory every time the computer is turned on. And a boot virus infects the master boot record of a hard drive. A companion virus adds a program to the operating system that is a malicious copycat version of the legitimate program. In addition to viruses, there are worms. The second type of malware that spreads is a worm. A worm is a malicious program designed to take advantage of a vulnerability in an application or an operating system in order to enter another computer. Once a worm has exploited the vulnerability on one system, it immediately searches for another computer that has the same vulnerability. A worm uses a network to send copies of itself to other devices also connected to the network. So worms spread from computer to computer. And now let's talk about malware that conceals. Trojans. A computer Trojan horse, sometimes referred to just as a Trojan, is an executable program advertised as performing one activity, but actually does something else. Or it may perform both the advertised and another malicious activity. Rootkits. A rootkit is a set of software tools used by an attacker to hide the actions or presence of other types of malicious software, such as Trojans, viruses, or worms. Rootkits do this by hiding or removing traces of login records, log entries, and related processes. They may also change the operating system to force it to ignore malicious activity. One approach used by rootkits is to alter or replace operating system files with modified versions that are specifically designed to ignore malicious activity. Other types of rootkits that operate at lower levels of the operating system can be more difficult to detect. Likewise, removing a rootkit from an infected computer may be difficult. This is because removing rootkits involves 2 steps. First, the rootkit itself must be erased or it will keep replicating. Second, the portions of the operating system programs and files that have been altered must be replaced with original files. There are 2 other malware that conceals. One is a logic bomb. Logic bombs basically are computer code that lie dormant until it's triggered by a specific logical event, usually a date. But it can also be some action by the user. A backdoor is software code that gives access to a program or service that circumvents any normal security protections. Now let's talk about malware that profits. Botnets. One of the most popular payloads of malware today, carried by Trojans, worms, and viruses, is a program that will allow the infected computer to be placed under the remote control of an attacker. This infected robot computer, also known as a bot, and also known as a zombie. When hundreds, thousands, or even hundreds of thousands of zombie computers are gathered into one logical computer network under the control of an attacker, this creates a botnet. In many ways, a botnet is the ideal base of operation for an attacker because zombies are designed to operate in the background, often without any visible evidence of their existence. Botnets provide a means for covering the tracks of the herder or the attacker. If any action is traced back, it ends up at the hijacked computer of an innocent user, not the attacker themselves. By keeping a low profile, botnets are sometimes able to remain active and operational for years. And the growth of always-on internet service, such as residential broadband, ensures that a large percentage of zombies in a botnet are accessible 24/7. Another malware that profits, spyware. Spyware is a general term used to describe software that spies on users by gathering information without their consent, thus it violates their privacy. Spyware usually performs one of the following functions on a user's computer: advertising, collecting personal information, or changing computer configurations. For instance, home pages on your browser. In addition to violating users' privacy, spyware can also have negative effects on the computer itself. It can slow down computer performance. It can make the system unstable. It can add new browser toolbars or menus, new shortcuts. It can hijack the home page, and it can increase pop-ups. Adware is another malware that profits. Adware is a software program that delivers advertising in a manner that is unexpected or unwanted by the user. And finally, Logger is a program that captures and stores every keystroke that a user types on the computer's keyboard. This information can be later retrieved by the attacker or secretly transmitted to the attacker. The attacker then searches for any useful information in the captured text, such as password, credit card numbers, or other personal information. This brings us to social engineering attacks. Social engineering is a means of gathering information for an attack by relying on the weaknesses of individuals themselves. Social engineering attacks can involve psychological approaches as well as physical procedures. Some of the psychological approaches include impersonation, phishing, spam, and hoaxes. The basic methods of persuasion include integration, which is flattery or insincerity, conformity, everyone else is doing it, and friendliness. The attacker attempts to convince the victim that the attacker can be trusted. Impersonation means to create a fictional or fictitious character and then play out that role on a victim. Common roles are often impersonated, such as a repair person, an IT support person, a manager, a trusted third party, or even a fellow employee. With a PH. One of the most common forms of social engineering. Phishing is sending an email or displaying a web announcement that falsely claims to be from a legitimate enterprise in an attempt to trick the user into surrendering private information. Some variations on phishing include farming. Instead of asking the user to visit a fraudulent website, farming automatically redirects the user to the fake site. Spear phishing. Whereas phishing involves sending millions of generic email messages, spear phishing targets specific users. Whaling. Whaling targets the big fish, namely wealthy individuals who typically would have had larger sums of money in a bank account that an attacker could access. And vishing. Instead of using email to contact a potential victim, a telephone call can be used instead. The attacker calls a victim, who upon answering hears a recorded message that pretends to be from the user's bank or some other institution, stating their credit card has experienced fraudulent activity or their bank account has had unusual activity. Some ways to recognize these types of messages include deceptive web links. A link to a website embedded in an email should not have an @ sign in the middle. Also, phishers like to use variations of legitimate addresses. Logos. Phishers often include the logo of the vendor and try to make the email look like the vendor's website as much as possible. A fake sender address, because sender addresses can be forged very easily. An email message should not be trusted simply because the sender's email address appears to be correct. Or an urgent request. Many phishing emails try to encourage a recipient to act immediately, or else the account will be deactivated. And finally, the amount of spam or unsolicited email continues to escalate. The reason so many spam email messages are sent that advertise drugs or distribute malware attachment is because sending spam is very lucrative. It costs spammers next to nothing to send millions of spam email messages every day. And even if they receive only a very small percentage of response for those products, spammers make a tremendous profit. If a spammer in one day sent spam to 6 million users for a product with a sale price of $50 that cost only $5 to make, and if only 1/1000% of the recipients responded and bought the product, this is a typical response rate, by the way, the spammer could make over $270,000 profit on a single email. Hoaxes. Hoax attackers can use a hoax as a first step of an attack. A hoax is a false warning, often contained in an email message claiming to come from, say, the IT department. The hoax purports that there is a really bad virus circulating around and that the recipient should erase specific files or change security configurations immediately. This brings us to physical procedures. Physical procedures include dumpster diving, tailgating, and shoulder surfing. Dumpster diving is exactly what it sounds like. Dumpster diving involves digging through trash receptacles to find information that can be useful in an attack. This is why you should shred everything. Tailgating. Organizations often invest thousands of dollars to install specialized doors that only permit access to authorized users who present a special card or enter a specific code. But once an authorized person enters the door and just walks past, leaving the door open or closing, then virtually any number of individuals can follow behind and also enter as long as they catch the door before it closes. This is known as tailgating. And shoulder surfing is watching over someone's shoulder as they input passwords or PIN numbers and memorizing those numbers or passwords. And remember, calm and document everything.